I'm super thrilled to get to talk with Emily Tamayo Maher. Emily is a book coach and best-selling author in women's spirituality. Her newest book is The Meaning Method, a spiritual path to writing and publishing. With her insightful, spirited, and inspiring approach to the creative life, Emily helps writers and entrepreneurs find their voice, grow their audience, publish their books, and make the difference they were meant to make. Her clients write in multiple genres, ranging from memoir, personal development, and self-help to fiction. Emily lives in Bogota, Colombia with her husband, Mauricio, and son, Martin. Emily, it's so good to see you.
It's so much fun to talk to you, Krista. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a part of this book club. I'm reading the books, and it's a joy to be here.
Well, awesome. Thank you. And full disclosure, Emily is my book coach.
Woo-hoo!
And you might be one of the only reasons I have not given up on this project, because let's face it, writing a book is super hard.
It is. It's a transformative journey. And I'm honored to be the first person to read this book, because I'm just sitting and turning the pages, and I can't wait to help birth it into the world. So yes, I love my job. I love your book. And I have been so thankful for your feedback throughout the process to be able to make sure that this book really serves and addresses all the stuff I wanted it to help people with when they're in this transformative process of writing a book. So yes.
Yeah, this is a beautiful book. The Meaning Method, it provides a spiritual path for writing and publishing. And you not only share practical wisdom and encouraging stories from your own life and inspiring ways to make book writing a little less daunting, a little less challenging, but you know, with kind of that spiritual way of approaching it, it's a little bit different than other writing books. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Tell us a little bit how this book is a little different. And I know when I'm reading it, I'm getting all of these wonderful tips and new ways of looking at it. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you. And actually, this is kind of a niche that I discovered and started helping people with, this spiritual path to writing and publishing. And there are a few things that really distinguish it. So first off, I'm just going to go through the sequence. What I do is I go through the feminine path down the chakras. The chakras are 3,000, 4,000 years old. The practice and the history goes back further than writing itself. And I started learning about this process back in 2018. And when I incorporated it into my book coaching, I found it was really helpful. And so I'll go down the whole process. I think one of my favorite things about it is that it takes the creative process into 7 stages. And what you might notice is when you're at the beginning of a book, you might think, okay, I've got to write this and publish it. But then it becomes kind of a mess, or it can be overwhelming, because there are various stages in creation that are a lot more subtle. And so something that's really helped me is to recognize, both for my clients and for myself, that when you're at the beginning of the process, and let's just start there, at the beginning of the process, you're just receiving inspiration, and it might come from different directions. It might come very rough. It might come with a lot of blank spaces in between. But when you're beginning this feminine chakra process, this manifesting process, you're starting in the crown chakra. And so that's when you're opening up, you're receiving little whispers, or there is something that I know is true for both of us. Something is calling you, and it feels like it's been calling you for a while. It's not going away. It's not going to stop. And so that's where we start the creative process. Just those whispers that you write down on napkins and hopefully in notebooks, because they're just easier to keep track of there. But you're just kind of writing things down. In this first stage, you might have 2 ideas, you might have 3 ideas. And this is what I love to call the journaling stage, where trust the crown, write it down is one of the mantras I talk about for this stage. Just start writing it down. Don't get worried about, how am I going to market this? How am I going to find a publisher? Just have fun with this stage as it is, and just start journaling. Then I noticed in this stage, one idea may pull ahead of the other ideas. And this is when you're going to want to start to really fantasize about following through with one book idea, with one particular project. This advice is given often if you can focus on one thing at a time, then you're going to be, so for instance, if you can start to focus on one book idea that you have, you will actually be able to manifest the other books more readily, more easily, if you can start to allow just one to pull ahead of the others and start to outline it. This is in the third eye. And so from going from the crown chakra to the third eye, this is when you start to choose. And because the manifesting path down the chakras is kind of a channel you're creating where you're opening up the different chakras, if you can start to choose one after a period of journaling, after a period of working on more than one at a time, then choosing one will allow you to work through all of the chakras a little bit more quickly and really open them up. So that's kind of where you're going from crown to third eye. The third eye has two sides. You're perceiving and you're commanding. And so you're really choosing which one you want to create. So there's both the fantasy aspect to it, where if I do this, this and this and this will open up for me, which is true. And then on the other side, there's also the just very practical, okay, how am I going to do this? Or, how do I structure this? I live in a city, I apologize for the sirens, but that will bring us to the throat chakra. So once you have an idea, an outline, then you want to start filling in the blanks with your voice. This is where I love working with structure, because when you have a little bit of structure, then all of a sudden the journaling you were doing in the crown chakra, it makes a little bit more sense. You're starting to go in a direction. I know as we've been working on both of our books, we've had that structure. And so that actually frees us up to play more and have more creativity when you get down to the throat chakra. Then next stage is the heart chakra. This is where the majority of the work happens. I call this the loving it up and changing the diapers phase, because you're creating that creative practice. And really, no matter what you do, you will find a way to keep coming back day after day. Of course, when you need rest and you need to give it a break, you'll do that, but you're committed. You're in a committed relationship with your work, and you're going to nurture it into being in that loving the creative practice stage. Then we've got editing in the solar plexus. This is your will. I call this going pro, because you're crossing all the I's, dotting all the T's. You're making it not only what is, your creative expression, your ideas, where you're kind of putting anything and everything in to experiment. You're more free to experiment in the throat chakra if you know later on you're going to go pro, you're going to edit it, you're going to polish it, you're going to see what works and what doesn't, and get it ready for public consumption. So public consumption is birthing the book in the sacral chakra. And so that's making those publishing decisions. We can talk more about that. This is a place I love to explore. And then finally, in the root chakra, this is where you're growing, you're reaching out those roots, and you're growing your market, and you're growing that audience of readers. This is where the book starts to take on a life of its own. It's a tree rooted in the ground. And then it can also start to create that career stability for you as an artist and as an author as well. And so that's the reverse system of the chakras. Many of us, if you've ever done Kundalini yoga, I have a lot of Kundalini yoga teachers in my community. And that's how we teach the ascending masculine path of the chakras, but this is just kind of a counterbalance. I found it fascinating ever since I started studying it. And so what I found so effective in all of my coaching sessions, now it's just great to put it all in a book together, so you can look it up, referenced with the chapter titles, grow your audience, turn to that page. And it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is one of the beautiful things about this book is no matter where you are on your writing journey, you can turn to that part of the book that you need some more insights on. But yeah, I think it's just fascinating from the standpoint of the chakras, because whenever in yoga and a lot of other things, you usually start with the root chakra and work your way up. So it was fascinating to me to think of creativity, though. It makes so much sense to start with the crown and give yourself a chance to write it down, and putting aside, the perfectionist or the critics, and knowing that they will have their turn in the editing process. So I love that. I think it's just really helpful way to look at the creative process. So, chakras, in case people aren't really familiar about what those are exactly, why don't we just kind of bring it down to a really short explanation? I would describe them as energy centers in the body. How would you describe them, Emily?
So yes, energy centers. Before I started doing this work, I was really curious about energy work. And so basically, just like you have physical organs that you may or may not be aware of, like we become very aware of our lungs when we're going on a jog. We may never really know that we have a pituitary gland unless somebody teaches us. But we have all these things, we have these various organs inside of us that help us live our lives. And so when I started learning about energy work, I started becoming far more aware of the chakras. And so they're energetic organs that are basically placed going down the spine, in different places, and they're actually connected to, and I can go into more detail on this if you like, but they're connected to the physical body. They're at every plexus, so to speak. You have a nerve center, you have an endocrine gland, and then you also have an energetic center, which is fun because both the nervous system and the endocrine system, they're both chemical and energetic. And so I almost describe them as a certain glow that you can feel. So just as you can feel your lungs, which are kind of part of the heart center or the heart chakra, when you really connect with a baby, or you love the creative process or whatever it is, you almost feel as if your heart is glowing. And so you can kind of feel that energy center where you're really putting that heart energy into something. And so when you become more aware of the chakras, you become more familiar with them. When I was doing my energy work course, this is a crazy story that I've actually never shared before. When I did my first energy course, my son was 2. I was just coming out of a dream state, and he was kind of sleeping in my bed by my side. And I saw this green, just vivid green spiral coming out of the center of him. And that was just, when you do this work, you may have different kinds of spiritual experiences. And I'll never forget that actually seeing a chakra. I saw his, I haven't seen it since, but it was a moment where I could actually see it. And different people who've worked a lot with this, have different talents, they may develop that ability to see it even more. But I suppose they're called, chakra means wheels, and they're kind of these spiraling centers of energy that you can feel throughout your body. One of the, let's say, largest or most powerful, most intense is the heart chakra. And so I think if you want to kind of feel into different chakras, start there. Just realize, when you're really feeling love, see if you can feel that kind of glow in your heart. And then the other chakras are very similar. You'll start to feel them in different ways. They exhibit different energy. But yeah, start with heart. It's a goodie.
That's so fascinating. I love how you explain that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Every writer has their challenges. And I'm curious, given how many writers you've worked with, and then you have your really large writers community on Facebook, is there a chakra block that you think is particularly challenging for writers, or that seems to come up a lot? Have you noticed anything like that?
I would say the throat chakra for women.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes up in different ways, but I would definitely say that our ability to express ourselves, and I feel this so much in your book, The word that's coming to mind is hushed. Throughout the centuries, especially, your book takes place in the 17th century, in the 1600s. And this is a time when I feel that women, and we know that women were hushed. We were, this was the time when witches were hunted. A lot of kind of feminine talents of intuition were hushed. And so, yes, let me double check on this, but yes, the throat chakra is a masculine chakra. Actually, the heart chakra is feminine. The third eye is considered feminine. These are, there's feminine and masculine and everything. These are kind of abstract terms, but the ability to kind of use our voice and express ourselves, it can be scary. And I suppose the way it exhibits itself, which are some chapters I talk about in the book, the inner critic is a big one. And so I have a chapter called The Inner Critic. We can sometimes hush ourselves before we even get the ideas fully formed. We'll limit the amount we want to write. We'll just, sometimes women I work with, well, all the rest of that isn't necessary. That playfulness and experimenting that happens in the throat chakra, sometimes I think that can get a little blocked. Many women who I work with, I don't remember if this happened with us, but they'll get throat infections or they'll start to cough a lot in our first sessions, because it's kind of this space where, I'm asking, like, just send me pages, just send me whatever. Don't worry about how it looks. Just start opening that up and getting it out. And so a lot comes up in the throat, especially for women. And so, of course, it's just an honor to be able to facilitate more expression. Often the people who have throat chakras that are really blocked, who are really blocked with their voice, their personal voice, those are exactly the stories we need the most. And so it's just an honor to be able to facilitate that more.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to one of my favorite quotes in your book. And you write, if we go through life and never express the imprint it makes on us, we're not just repressed, we're oppressed. We're letting the world shove us around without saying anything. On the other hand, if we choose to make art out of our experience, we have the capacity to give life its proper value. I just think that is such a beautiful way of putting it. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why you think that's such an important point that needs to be made?
Thank you. Yes, in the book, and that was actually, I started thinking about that and writing about that in the first edition of the Meaning Method. And so this is the second edition of the Meaning Method, which is, I think, another wonderful part of this whole process is that if you just start to open yourself up and express yourself, your work will develop and grow with you, which is why I really encourage people to send me their work in any form, no matter where I'm entering the process. I know I can draw more out of you. And so for me, even after the publishing process started, I first started creating the Meaning Method. I'd only coached a few people. I didn't know people's needs as much as I do now, but I put myself out there and I expressed it. And then that meaning, that significance, that value of life, once I had established a foundation, I kind of put my stake in the ground and said, this is what writing means to me. This is why art is important to me. I started developing and growing as an author and am able to help more people develop and grow as authors. And so it's really nice to be able to just experiment and express it for the first time, because no matter where you begin, you're just setting off on a path where things will go deeper and deeper. In this book, I've been able to share many of my own stories about transitioning my career from being a teacher in a traditional school to becoming a full-time book coach. And that has been wonderful. But that has also given that story meaning by reflecting on it, turning it into art. It's given it meaning because now I know many of the people who read this book are looking to make certain career transitions also. They want to make transfer into writing the books they feel they were born to write. And so not only have I been able to reflect on my path for myself and see the significance of the leaps of moving to another country, of meeting the various people who mean so much to me in my life. I've been able to reflect on it for me, but then I've also been able to share it with other people and allow them to evaluate their own lives and start to see those patterns also and turn it into art.
Well, and I think it makes so much sense. I mean, as writers, that's really how we make sense of the world, at least from my perspective. It's writing an essay about something that, I experienced in my life and then going back and making it look pretty or, making it readable. But through that process, you do go through a lot of the chakras that you had mentioned earlier. But through that, it's like there's almost a transformation that takes place, much like, the hero's journey, where one thing that's always bothered me is when somebody says, if it's not easy, it's probably not worthwhile. And I'm thinking, no, that's the whole point of life, is to go through some of those struggles and get to the other side and have that transformation in your life, and then be able to write about it and share that with people and help people see themselves perhaps in those words, or maybe it resonates in some way, is extremely gratifying as an artist or writer, whatever kind of creative work that a person does. So I just think that is such a valuable piece of advice that you offer with this book.
Thank you. And actually, that reminds me also, one other big theme in the quote that you were talking about is, when we go through life, everything's a subjective experience. I think about, the historical fiction that you're writing, which was a very hard time for women. Subjectively, we experience those obstacles, and then we get to turn it objectively into a piece of art where we look at what it means and the significance. So that's also a process that you go through no matter what you're writing. If you're writing psychological thrillers, if you're writing romance, if you're writing self-help, you feel, what it is to fall in love with someone. And then when you're expressing it, you're becoming the creator. You're becoming God in a certain sense, and you're making a beautiful object, which gives even the worst experiences and the best experiences meaning and significance, which is what they can all have in common.
And that's the beauty of art,
Yeah.
to be able to touch people's hearts, entertain people, or whether it's to entertain people or to help people learn something, that's what makes life really magical, is the art, the writing, all of those things that come from the creativity that makes us human, I guess.
And that's fun because, with the transcendent path, if it's a spiritual path, often we're trying to, transcend the world. And so this is a little different in the fact, as the feminine, as creators, we're kind of saying, well, we're here for a reason. We're creating something, we're putting something into the world. And so, of course, it connects to that transcendent spiritual path, which is very objective, but then it's also, this might differ from a strictly Buddhist path in a certain sense, in that it kind of asserts, the meaning method asserts that, yes, we're here for something, we're here for a reason. Let's make this world the most beautiful it can be, and let's continue to nurture and commit. So yes, to a better place.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the inner critic. Let's dive into that just a little bit more. You write, when you trade a vicious cycle, the inner critic, for a virtuous cycle, creative flow, your body of work has everything it needs to thrive. So many authors, I know I've gotten stuck in this vicious cycle, and there are authors that practically marry themselves off to this abusive inner critic, which basically, and then they just stop writing, or they stop creating, which is completely heartbreaking if you think about it. do you still deal with inner critic? And if you do, how do you quiet that voice? How do you get into your creative flow?
Thank you. Yes. So, there are a lot of negative stereotypes about artists to begin with. People think of Hemingway as an alcoholic, and, people sometimes, I think, when they're beginning a creative project, they maybe have a negative stereotype that they're going to lose their minds. And I think, especially in the 20th century, that was almost romanticized. The
Mm-hmm.
craziness of extremely artistic people was romanticized. And so I think we all have our different neural patterns. We all have our vicious cycles and our virtuous cycles. But one thing I really wanted to clarify in this book is creativity is a virtuous cycle. It is not a vicious cycle. As humans, I've definitely struggled, and I talk about some of these struggles in the books. In the book, I've struggled with anxiety, at a young age, very early, when I probably romanticized the craziness of artists. I struggled with a drug addiction in my teens and 20s, early 20s. Very happy to let that go at the age of 22.
Yeah.
But so there are kind of negative stereotypes, but creativity itself, that throat chakra, is a cleansing, is a representation of truth. And so you can commit, especially through this book, you can commit to a lifetime of creativity. And in my experience, that inner critic has become quieter and quieter and quieter through positive habits. And so I suppose in my own process, to kind of address that side of it, more than anything, I know that I do tend to get anxiety, but I can notice those patterns. So this is an exercise that I put into the worksheets and the book. So naming that inner critic. I know every single day after 4 o'clock, I'm going to be way more critical of my work. That's just my pattern. After 4 o'clock, getting into late at night, I'm like, what am I doing? What's going to happen? Oh no, oh no, oh no. And so I will say that voice has gotten way less specific, because I'm like, oh, what time is it? Yes, I recognize I always worry in the evening. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always so much better in the morning. So I do tend to have less of an inner critic, just because I recognize the cycles of my day. And another thing that's specifically in the book that I really have done with myself is, I notice if I do get really worried about something, it's because I think something is never going to happen in my life. Why am I even doing this? This is
Mm-hmm.
never going to come to fruition. But, after, over 40 years on the planet, I've realized, okay, everything I've thought that about has actually come to fruition with some good hard work. I start to recognize the pattern, even if it does sneak up on me once in a while. And, once I recognize it and I realize that it's not real, it's just a thought pattern,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't trigger me, it doesn't get its claws into me as much. And then I can just really hook onto those positive habits of getting up early in the morning rather than writing at night. And I can hook into that virtuous cycle and really create that upward spiral, where not by any enormous feat of silencing my inner critic, or building an enormous audience, I just do certain positive things habitually, and it tends to accentuate the good things in my life. And then those negative voices, the anxiety, which I had an awful battle with,
Mm-hmm.
I just know the positive things I can do, very small things I can do on a daily basis. And that quiets down that anxiety. It quiets down the inner critic. And then everything just starts to move in that more productive, more beautiful, more stable direction.
So it's almost like you became more conscientious about when those things were happening. I know my inner critic is a late sleeper, so I tend to, if I write in the morning, I don't have as many problems with that in that voice.
Yeah, they haven't gotten up yet. Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think that's why Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way always recommends, doing your journaling first thing in the morning before that any of those little voices start coming into your head.
And that's, yeah, that, because it's part of your, what is it, circadian rhythms? I might not be thinking of the right word, but that's natural because, when you first wake up in the morning, you've got serotonin mixed with a little bit of cortisol, which helps you concentrate. Not everyone has the same circadian rhythm. There are definitely people who are night owls, and so they
Yeah.
have a different hormonal balance. But yes, that's the other thing, is so often when you can start to recognize the different hormones that are going through your system at night, it's not anything about you, it's the chemicals in your brain at that hour. And so don't listen to them, start to recognize them.
Blame it on body chemistry.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love that you know these things.
I have, seriously. Okay. And so there's another thing. I'm not saying that this was easy by any means. Like every single step along this process for me was like, okay, what is going on? I'm going to read a book about it. But that's another reason I love being a book coach, because honestly, if I read a lot of books, and so if I have a problem, I figure there's going to be a book about it, and I read that book. And so I know that so many people I've worked with have the book that someone else needs. And because if I study something, I will read so much about it. I need every single one of those books. And so it's just an honor to be able to help get every one of those books into the world, because even if it seems as if there are a lot of books, there are a lot of places people want to go in their imaginations. There are people finish a book in a week and they're ready for the next one. So abundance in this particular place in life is just a good thing.
Oh, that's so true. I know there's scarcity really has no place in
the book world.
No. It really doesn't, because it's almost like teachers. When you hear something that you're struggling with from one teacher and you continue to struggle, and then another teacher shares the same topic but teaches it in a different way, and you have kind of that aha moment. It's the same way with books. There's certain books that are going to resonate with different readers, and I think that's what makes it such a fascinating process.
Absolutely, yes.
So I want to get to, before we run out of time, I do want to talk a little bit about audience growth. I know that's a big part of your book, because it's part of the publishing. With publishing, you also have to make sure you have someone to sell your book to. But so much, a lot of things you do really well is with social media. Of course, social media can cause plenty of hand wringing for many of us. And I'm just curious if you have some advice about moving past that, or making social media work for us so that it's actually fun and so we can start growing that audience. What do you tell authors who are really struggling with getting out there?
This is lovely. And I have made it a very joy-filled part of my process in my life. We met on social media, many people who I'm very close to at this point. I've met them on social media. And so just quick, right off the bat, is I think what causes the hand wringing is a lack of connection, just a feeling that it's all tech, feeling that, there's a lot of negativity about social media, and there's a lot of misinformation and all of those things going on. And so having that personal connection and really treating human beings like human beings, that's one thing that has kept it in a joy in my life for years. But taking a step back, we were just talking about positive and negative cycles. And so I will say, one of the things that I talk about in social media a lot, and I've probably repeated this to you on various occasions, is trust the snowball, not the avalanche. So I have thousands of people in my audience between Instagram and Facebook, and that's been really fun for me. Many of these people who I keep going back to Instagram for I go back because I know the people, like I know their lives. I've had conversations. And so for me, the joyful part of it becomes that it's like a phone conversation with a relative who you've known. And so it doesn't have that impersonal spotlight techie feel. It really does feel like this is the way I connect to people that I have genuine friendships with. But the thing that I want to say about the positive cycle is that there was no one day where I got 1,000 people in my group. That never happened on a single day. It's always been a handful of people at a time, a few dozen people at most. And that has been really healthy. That snowball, not the avalanche cycle, to just do it a little bit at a time, because number one, that's kept people more active. It's not like I was ever overwhelmed with a ton of people. I was just meeting people on a weekly basis. So for instance, in my Facebook group, I'll get out there and I'll meet new people on a weekly basis, just one day a week. Week after week turns into thousands of people. And so it keeps it easy. And I know I've had wonderful mentors in my life, and I would ask them, oh my goodness, you were in, this famous magazine, your business was featured in this famous magazine. Was that the turning point? Did you wake up one morning and everything is different? And what they would tell me is, no, actually, that's not it. It was the same for me, creating just this wheel. Chakra, upward spiral, wheel is the theme here. It was just this wheel of coming back and nurturing my audience, a handful of people at a time, and doing that for years is what created a movement. And then one thing that's happening for me that I appreciate so much is that people are inviting friends. That did not happen at first. It's not like I met 3 people and each of them told 3 people, and then the next week, 3 weeks later, I had 1 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
No, little by little, by that kind of just coming back to it day after day, the audience grew. There have been times when I was finishing my book where I didn't meet anybody new, where I was just really focused on finishing that book. I still would put up a post and connect with the community that I cared about for years. But yes, it's something I've been dedicated to over time, a little bit at a time. And much like when I was a teacher, every single day, I would have to go up and give a class and teach something. Well, it's not, for me, it's not that different than social media. And actually it's far more simple, because I'll just put something that I think will inspire like-minded people. I started with only the Facebook group, didn't overwhelm myself. I did 4 posts a day in a Facebook group, and then would reach out and meet other people at certain points. But I think that's what I love about social media. And I'll be talking about it a lot more in the coming weeks in my group. But what I've loved about it, and it's really sold more books than any of the other things I've tried. I've been so happy to be able to have this organic growth in book sales, to be able to spread the word about my book. And then that starts to trigger the Amazon algorithms. When I have people coming in from social media, Amazon starts to pick up, and then it starts to spread the word. But I've been really thankful to be able to have social media. I don't look at it as an impersonal way of connecting with people, though. I really do listen. I really do generate genuine connections. So I never feel as if I'm shouting into a void and not being heard. But that's because a lot of it is conversations with individual people and taking the time to create that bond, so that I'm not listening to my own voice echoing. It really is, oh, what did you think about that? Oh, it's a conversation.
And that is the key word, conversation, because I think,
exactly.
For so many businesses, I see it a lot in business, where I'll get a message on LinkedIn or something, and I immediately know they just want to sell me something.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole, when I first connected with you, it's like there was an immediate, like, mutual type of exchange. And people, that's what people crave. I think that's what people go on social media to experience, that exchange of, maybe to laugh or learn something new, or, just, but to be able to connect with somebody one on one is always really the kind of the dopamine hit that I think we all really carries us through the day, rather than just for that moment in time, I guess, and a simple like, or, whatever. So I just think that's such a valuable piece of advice, whether you're a writer or in business, or, going through life.
Exactly. And it's so interesting because if the dopamine hit is about a number of likes, where you want to get like 100 likes,
Mhm,
that's going to become a void because it's meaningless,
mhm.
if you don't know the people. But yes, when you can start to make a joke with people who and what their life is like, and yeah, there's that sense of companionship. That is not a void. That is something that grows and makes you more excited to market your book every day,
Yeah,
because
because
you're
you're
doing it with a bunch of companions, not a
exactly.
bunch of bots. Yes.
So the name of your writing community is called the Writer's Block, and they're on Facebook. And if you're a writer watching this, definitely check out Emily's group. It is super inspiring, lots of fun posts. I go to it daily, so
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
definitely worth it. So tell us a little bit about your personal writing life. Do you have any regular writing rituals, or what do you do that really helps you accomplish those big goals?
I love blocking out a space in my calendar. And because I run a business and I'm a mom, I really do have to block out the space for it. Um, but I love going to a coffee house and just giving myself a good block of creative time. That's how I got this book done. And yes, it absolutely met. In July and August, I was not doing, I had hoped to be able to do a whole bunch of prep work and audience growth in order to send this book out. I didn't. I went to coffee shops, I got my cappuccino, and I write things. I hand write things first because that's what brings me joy. That's what gives me the good chemicals. And I just lose myself in my imagination in the project that I'm working on for a good couple hours. And so I do batch everything. So I'm doing meetings on a certain day. I'm doing, audience growth or business development on a certain day. And then my creative days are my creative days. And those are, like my lungs, my breath. And so I know other writers, of course, I work with a lot of writers who are way more productive than I am. And so they go straight to the computer, 3 hours a day, every single day. And they produce more books than I do, which is great too for them. And so
Wow.
I would say with my sacred time, I will need to take a break if I'm very productive. I can't go every day. If I've had an extremely productive, say, set of 3 months, I will probably take at least a month off afterwards because I have a very wave-like creative process. But it's personal, it's cappuccino fueled, and it's often little cafes that really represent that romantic writer's life that I've always wanted. And no matter what stage I'm at in the process or how many book sales I've had in the past or anything like that, I have that time with my cappuccino, my pen, and my notebook. And that's what I wanted from the process, is to be able to do that kind of for a reason, but to be able to have that time to just spend with my own ideas and be really happy about it. And so everybody's process is very different writers. If you're a series writer and you're really wanting to get that next book out, you might have a different way of doing it. But I think the more than anything is finding what brings you joy, because if you value the idea of being an author more than you value the process of playing with words and playing with ideas and putting it together, you will burn out. If you just want to be an author, you need to find a way to really love the document in front of you.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I know we're doing it together. You just got to love that manuscript. You can't just love the outcome. You've got to love the manuscript.
I honestly don't know how you could get a book written if you don't, I mean, written well, something that you feel really proud of, if you don't love the process. I really don't, because there are moments during the process where it can be like, why am I doing this again? Because it can be so challenging. But I do it, because I love it. And I can't imagine not being, writing and working on my different projects, because that's what brings me joy. So I think what it comes down to is, does it bring you joy?
Exactly. And then looking at it as the chakra process, there's some people want to have a traditionally published contract, and that's their goal. But that's just a moment in time. That's just that sacral chakra. And so you're going to spend most of your time in the heart and in the upper chakras. And then when you get down to it, that, bursting out into your audience, or that getting that professional book deal, I love those. And that's so exciting to think about. But you can't fuel the whole process from there. Yeah.
So tell everybody where they can find your book and where they can find you. And then I want to ask you a few really short questions, and then we'll wrap up. But I want to make sure everybody knows where to find the Meaning Method.
Awesome. So the Meaning Method is on Amazon Unlimited. So if you are an Amazon Unlimited subscriber, you get it for free already. It's already yours. And then it's also available on Kindle, and it's available in paperback. So right at this moment in time, it's available on Amazon. The Meaning Method, A Spiritual Path to Writing and Publishing by Emily Tamayo Maher. You'll be able to find it there. I'm in this group, so I'll put up the links. And yes, my website is themeaningmethod.com. Very simple. And I'm in the writer's block as well. I'm in there every day. I'm also on Instagram at emily.tamayo.maher.
Okay. And I'll be sure to add that at the end of this too, so everybody knows where to find you in case they didn't catch that.
Yay. And I'm in this group.
Yes. So let's do the short and snappy speed round, shall we? These are just 3 short questions and we'll wrap up. What is one of the best pieces of advice you ever got about writing?
Let's see. Oh my goodness. I feel like it's something by Julia Cameron. I'll murder the quote, but not to take it too seriously. I think that starts to crunch you up. But yes, it's a fun process. It's a joyful process. And so I feel, yeah, Julia Cameron is the patron saint of writers. I appreciate so much of what she put out into the world. I definitely owe so much of my career to her. So yes, Keep it playful, keep it fun. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Great advice. What is one of your favorite books by an inspiring female author that you often find yourself recommending to others?
The one that I recommend to others is, of course, I love The Artist's Way. And I don't know if I recommend this, but Nicole Cross, she's a literary fiction writer who had such a profound impact on me. And so I love her book, Great House. And it really changed the way I write. She would be my favorite female author. I just think she's incredible.
Oh, I'm going to check her out. Thank you.
Yeah, she's so good. Let's see. I'm not going to grab the book. Okay, keep going.
Is it there? You want to grab it real quick?
Let me see. Well, she signed it. She actually came here. She was my favorite author long before she came to Bogota. And I guess I'm not seeing it. But yes, she did come to Bogota and she signed my book. And that was a wonderful synchronicity. It was my first year living here.
That's one thing I miss about with the whole COVID epidemic was, not getting to go to book signings as much. So hopefully they'll be back out again soon. A lot of the authors.
Because we don't want to, a lot of our authors are, our favorite authors are older. And so we don't want to kill them either. But yes, we'd love to see them again.
Exactly. That wouldn't be good. So what do you always keep near you when you write? Do you have anything that you always keep on your desk, or maybe it's something in the other, or what is it that you always want near you?
Obviously my coffee.
Your cappuccino.
Exactly. But I do pay special attention to the notebooks and the pens I use. I love you know, whenever I feel like I'm bringing a book to life, I always have a special notebook that's going to kind of contain that book. I know that the very first version of the meaning method that I wrote in 2016, 2017, there was a cathedral on the front of it. And I just loved coming back to that notebook because it really was kind of a sacred place where I was creating something new that I knew was going to have a big impact on myself and hopefully others. So I do pay attention, and I really do try to find some symbolic, beautiful notebook that I'm going to be excited to come back to.
Oh, love it. Thank you so much, Emily. This was such a fun conversation with you as always. I love talking to you, but thank you for sharing your wisdom with
Thank you,
everyone
Krista.
today.
I've been looking forward to this forever. And so it's so wonderful to be able to, yeah, this is part of manifesting, is thinking of the awesome conversations you get to have when the book comes out. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Emily.